So recently, FAO produced a document called Achieving SDG 2 without breaching the 1.5 degree centigrade threshold, a global roadmap. And in that, we identified 120 actions in 10 domains, which were identified, which would enable the food system to deliver sufficient food, sufficient nutritious food to people, while also influencing in a positive way climate change. So there's a lot that is an indicator of the amount of actions that can be taken, which support food systems and which support climate change targets. And the first domain was in livestock. As we know, livestock does produce livestock production. It does produce greenhouse gas emissions, and so some of the changes that could be made. An example of a solution is of the several which are, I think it's the 9 which are proposed, is to restore degraded pasture and improve grazing management practices. And that's an example of how intervening in agricultural practices can help support livestock production, which is important for the human diet in limited quantities, while also supporting climate change. Another domain of action is in fisheries and agriculture. And an example of an action there would be to improve sustainability practices in fisheries, which can support the long-term production of fisheries, which is important for food systems, while also reducing the impact on the environment, which then impacts on climate change. And then we have to take action on crops as well. There were a whole load of solutions around improving crop breeding and improving farming practices and integrated farming systems. Enabling healthy diets for all is also really important, because if you improve diets, you can improve, for example, you can improve food-based dietary guidelines, which help meet environmental considerations as well as nutrition considerations as a policy option. There's some actions around forest and wetlands, and we know that protecting existing forest and wetlands, that's good for the food system. It's also good for climate. There's actions that can be taken in soil and water, improving regenerative farm practices, for example. Food loss and waste is one of those win-win solutions that's really just kind of needs to get done, because we know that improving food loss and waste is good for the economy, it's good for nutrition, and it's good for climate change. Clean energy is another area, the use of clean energy in the food system. And then we also need policies which are more kind of cross-cutting policies across the system, which provide frameworks in order to enable these other policies which are more technically focused. And one of those areas is around improving the life of women and girls. It's around gender. We know that women and girls are incredibly important in food systems. We also know that the actions that they take is incredibly important for climate change. So we also need these kind of cross-cutting policies, which provide an enabling environment for these kind of solutions to be implemented. Well, I would like to mention one initiative in particular, which is a new initiative that we are establishing, which is tentatively called the Systems Change Learning Programme. So this is not a technically focused solution, but one of the things that we've realised is that we need to really undertake a change to the system as a whole. And that means really changing the form of the system, the nature of the system, the dynamics and relationships of the system. It goes deeper than technical solutions. Technical solutions are important, but unless we take what we call a systems approach, even those technical solutions often don't get implemented. And what I mean by a systems approach is an approach which recognizes that there are many different outcomes of the food system. I mentioned these earlier: climate change, biodiversity, environment, health, nutrition. and livelihoods, poverty, inequalities, gender issues, economic development. All of these are outcomes of the system. And in a way, the biggest challenge to making change and improving the food system is that whenever you try and make a change in one area, either it can have unintended consequences in others. For example, during the Green Revolution period, and indeed including efforts to increase productivity at the primary production level, the emphasis was on, right, we just need to produce more food. And what wasn't understood in those days was if you just focus on producing more calories in an economically viable way, you end up losing out on nutrition. So pulses, for example, were kind of fell away compared to rice in many settings. It also might actually undermine the ability of the producers to generate money. That's the livelihoods aspects. And it actually might have destructive elements on the environment. So if you are only focused on achieving one goal in the food system, you end up having unintended consequences elsewhere. And so what we need to do is to take a systems approach, which is about trying to balance the achievement of all of these different goals. So one of the things that we're trying to do at FAO is to help people learn from each other about how to take this really challenging systems approach, which is essentially about taking action that recognizes that any action that we take in the system is connected to another one. And that means that we need to start talking to different people. We need to engage across boundaries, across the sectors and silos that we work in. It means that we need to engage in conflict management and navigating difficult differences in power relations. If we are going to shift the system to achieve all of these goals rather than just optimizing for productivity or any one particular goal. And because when we end up trying to do that, we end up just meeting so much opposition, so much difficulty, nothing ever gets done in the first place. So what we're trying to do at FAO is to help the system of actors who work in agriculture and food systems to think more systemically and to act more coherently and to work more collectively in order to achieve these multiple goals, which will enable these more technical solutions to be implemented.